YouTube, what is going on? I hope everybody's doing well today. So let's talk about waterfalls in this video. When my wife and I were living in Hawaii, when I was first kind of getting into photography, I kept seeing all these nice, silky, smooth shots of like waterfalls and oceanscapes and things like that. And I was like, how in the world do you make a photo that looks like that? So I went out to the ocean, took a snapshot on my phone, and I'm like, this looks nothing like these photos that I'm seeing with this silky smooth water. So in today's video, we're going to be heading out to a waterfall I've never been to before. We're going to be talking about everything you guys need to know on how to get that silky smooth water effect in waterfalls or oceanscapes or whatever. Let's do it. And we are here. Let's check things out. Alright, so I've got my composition set up. There's kind of a viewing deck over there. We set up over here just in case anybody else comes up this way. I didn't want to block the entire viewing deck. But in terms of composition, I've got both of these falls framed kind of in the middle. I've got the tops of the trees as somewhat of a foreground element. And there's this bush right here. If anybody does happen to go over that way, on that part of the viewing deck, this bush or tree or whatever it is should be blocking them mostly. So when we do decide to take a shot, hopefully there won't be anybody over there. It's kind of like distracting. Now that the composition's out of the way, let's get into the meat and bones of the video here. There are a lot of factors to consider when shooting waterfalls. The first one is time of day. The second one is how bright is it outside. The third one is what's the weather like. All these things kind of play into how the shot's going to look. So like, you obviously don't want to shoot in the middle of the night unless you have strobe lights or something shooting on, pointing on the falls. For me, the best time of day to shoot waterfalls would be like either early in the morning, just before sunrise or right after, or later in the afternoon, just before sunset, or either right after sunset. The reason for this is because the light is very soft at those times of day. If you shoot waterfalls in the middle of the day, unless you have an ND filter, the lighting is just going to be too harsh and you're not going to be able to get that long exposure, silky kind of look that you want to get. The only exception to that is if it's kind of cloudy like it is now. There are a lot of clouds in the sky. Clouds really help to kind of even out the light and make the light softer. So the biggest tip apart from that, in fact, the variable that's going to play the most into getting that silky smooth water effect is going to be the exposure time, or the shutter speed on your camera. So the shutter speed is kind of like, it's basically how long the shutter is open for, allowing the camera to receive light. So the longer the shutter speed, the more light's going to come into the camera, and the smoother the water is going to look, because we get more of that motion introduced onto the sensor. The best shutter speed that I've found is around half of a second. If you really want to smooth out the water, you can go more than that. You can go like 20 or 30 seconds, but half of a second for me seems to be kind of like the right balance between getting some kind of cool motion in the water versus no motion at all. You just get like just straight white lines or whatever. But it's basically going to be up to whatever look you're trying to get. And so regarding exposure time, this is where the time of day really comes into play, because you don't want it to be too bright outside or else you won't be able to get a long exposure. So it's right now, it is 5:44. It's very cloudy. The sun is going to be setting in about an hour and a half. So this is like the perfect time of day to get more of a long exposure effect with this waterfall. So let's go through some examples. So right here, as you guys can see, I'm on f8, 1/25 of a second, ISO 100. So if we take this shot, I'm on a 2-second timer as well. Let's review this. If we zoom in here and look at the water, we get a lot of motion in the water. There's not that silky smooth look. So we have two choices. Well, actually we really have one choice. We're going to have to up the exposure time or up the shutter speed. So let's move to 1/5 of a second, see if we notice a difference. Now if you notice, everything got a lot brighter. To counterbalance that, we need to raise our aperture, which is kind of like the iris of the camera. Let's raise it to f14. We'll try this. Alright, now let's review that shot. We'll look at the water here. Okay, now we're starting to get a lot smoother water. So this versus this, you guys can see this is much smoother. Let's take it even a step further. Let's go to, let's see if we can go to 1 second. So again, we'll have to close our aperture down. We'll go f22. That may be a little bright, but we'll see. So 1 second exposure here. See how that looks. Yeah, you guys see now? This is starting to look like very, very smooth. Let's zoom in here. Yep, much smoother than the other one. So this is a 1 second exposure. This was a 0.5, or no, this was a 1/5 second exposure. And this is a 1/25 second exposure. You guys see there's a big difference between these three shots. All right guys, so we are in Adobe Lightroom now. If you look at this shot, this is the shot we took at 1/25 of a second. Let's zoom in here and look at the water. See how we've pretty much stopped the motion of the water? There's a little bit of motion here, but we've pretty much like stopped it, dead in its tracks. So as I was saying, the shorter the shutter speed, the more you'll stop the motion rather than just letting the motion of the water kind of turn into that silky, smooth water look. Let's go to the next shot. This is the one at 1/5 of a second. If we zoom in here, there's a lot more silky smoothness to the water in this shot than there was in this one at 1/25 of a second. Now let's move on to the shot we took at 1 second, and there is a ton of silk, smooth, whatever adjectives you want to use for the water here. Now I think I might have overexposed this a little bit. I don't think anything's blown out in my histogram over here, but these shots were not taken to impress anyone. They were just taken to kind of make this point. So yeah, 1/25 of a second here, 1/5 of a second here, and 1 full second here. So that's another thing to think about. The longer exposure you have, you may possibly have to close up your aperture a little bit more. Unless you're going to risk blowing the photo out somewhere. Especially on the water, what I've noticed, the longer exposures you get, the brighter the water becomes, because it's basically just white. So you really don't want to blow out the waterfall at all. That's kind of like your main subject. And if you ever print these, you're going to want actual like color ink on the paper where the waterfall is. You don't want the printer not to print anything, but just have white space there. The next thing to consider after aperture is your ISO setting. Now again, we were on ISO 100, which is the lowest my camera will go. More than likely, if you're shooting in the daytime and not after the sun is set, you're going to want the lowest ISO possible. And again, it's all with the objective of getting as much light onto the center of the camera as possible for as long as possible, so you can smooth that water out. The higher the ISO, the shorter shutter speed you'll be able to get. The lower the ISO, the longer shutter speed you'll be able to get. So let's say one more thing. If you do want to shoot waterfalls in the middle of the day, you will definitely need one of these. This is what's called an ND filter, or neutral density filter. This particular one is a 10 stop. What this does is it fits right on the camera lens just like that, and it basically acts as sunglasses for your camera. So this stops the light from hitting the sensor as much as it would be without an ND filter. So what this will do is allow you to get that extra long shutter speed during the middle of the day. Alright guys, as always, thank you so much for watching. I really hope this was informative. It helped you out if you're looking to shoot waterfalls. I really hope this video helped. Please give me a thumbs up. It's kind of informative. Hit that subscribe button. I'll see you guys next time. We can clip that part out. I had like a bug in my nose and stuff.